All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Guilty as Charged podcast. You might notice it looks a little bit different today. Instead of Steven and Tyler, Steven is on vacation. Tyler's a little bit busy. So, Dan Wolkenstein from the Chargers Unleashed podcast decided to come on and co host with me today. So, Dan, how are you doing?
Alex, I am good. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited. Friends of the show. Can't wait. Let's get things going.
Yeah, so you've been having a little bit of a busy off season, a new podcast with the LAFB network. How has that been going?
It's been going, honestly, it's been going really well. My co host, Jake Hefner, and I, we've kind of been through a lot in a previous podcast, going into this one. But honestly, we are so happy with the move. We're loving our time with LA Football Network. In the podcast, we're having a ton of fun. We're having a lot of guests. We're doing a lot of stuff that is entertaining, is authentic. And honestly, it's just something that both of us really enjoy doing and being, a part of this community and a part of the fan base. The podcast has been crazy, but we're loving every minute of it.
Yeah, and you've said that you got a lot of guests. You've had Rashawn Slater and Drew Tranquil, and almost the whole Chargers team pass through. What have been some of the most fun moments from there, or any insight you gotten into sort of the 2021 version of this team from those interviews?
Yeah, we have been fortunate enough to have some folks come onto the show. Man, there's a lot of fun memories. I think when Chris Harris came on the show and he was talking about best dressed and was talking about Nazir Adderley, and then Nazir Adderley came on the show later and was talking about how he can wear the jumpsuit better than anyone else, and he's having the jumpsuit on right then, I believe, when we were recording. Rashawn Slater was great. Chris Rumpf was hilarious. He was calling out everyone in his episode. I think he was calling out Chado Jocinco and FIFA, telling us about some homework he had to do on a state bird for some of his rookie homework assignments. Honestly, there's just a lot. And I think what has one of the themes that has come from all of these interviews is just how excited and how much energy this team has and how excited they are to see Derwin James play football again. Like that is we've gotten to the point where we've had to ask them, other than Derwin James, who else are you excited to see on the show or to see coming in 2021? And yeah, this team is really energized, very, very friendly, very open, authentic. And I think a lot of that kind of comes from this coaching staff and Brandon Staley. I think he's kind of pumped up this team with a lot of just of energy and just excitement. And I think that's kind of flown throughout not just the players, but the organization, folks covering the team, you guys, myself, and fans. I mean, everyone's excited for this time of year.
Yeah, another cool thing that you and Steven got to do actually was you were interviewing players before the combine or during pro days and stuff. How was that? Was that fun? And I saw Steven getting breaking news credit on Instagram for saying which players interviewed with the Chargers and which players didn't. So that what was that like?
It was honestly, it was a lot of fun, and it was cool to see a lot of the players. I know you guys, I'm sure, did a ton of work on a lot of the prospects that came in before the draft, and it was nice to kind of be able to talk to some of those bigger ones. We talked to J.C. Horn, and I think that was the first time that anyone heard that he was, in connection with the Chargers a bunch and talking about his connections there. Got to talk to Caleb Farley about his injury, and that kind of got some buzz around the news. It was a lot of fun. We talked to Micah Parsons. We've talked to a few different folks. And I think the part that was fun was just at the end of the day, these are all humans. These are all players. And realistically, like they're in their young 20s and they're all like looking forward to like the best times of their life and their dreams coming true. And so for the most part, like it was really interesting just to see how polished the majority of these players were. Like I remember myself at that age, and there's no way I could have handled myself the way they did. So it was a lot of fun, some fun exposure, some fun questions and answers. Definitely an experience I'm looking forward to continuing to do.
Yeah, I mean, I'm 22 and I can barely handle, bumbling on this podcast, let alone, talking to the media. So that's something, but yeah, so credit to you guys for doing those interviews and doing all the, scout work that's just a crazy part of the off season. I also wanted to ask, because this has been, making the rounds on Twitter, I wanted to get to the jersey stuff. Specifically, the new helmet rule has come into effect, and people have been ranking their top 6 Chargers jerseys of that list. So I'm going to put you on the spot here. Rank your top 6.
Ooh, okay, I don't have all of them in front of me, but I'm pretty sure I know number 1 is the yellow pants and the powder blue. That's 1 for me.
Okay.
2 might be the white on white. 3, I think I got to go the navy. I love that color scheme. And after that, I want to say I like the yellow with the white. That looks good too. Yellow pants, white shirt. And then weirdly enough, I think the color rush might be it's great. I love it, but it might be my least favorite. And word on the street, I don't know if this is breaking news, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be a new color rush jersey, or at least I know they're not going to be keeping that one. So stay tuned. There may be a gray. I'm not sure, but we'll see. So honestly, I love all of our jerseys, and I think Chargers fans are so lucky to be able to not really have a bad option.
Oh yeah.
There are some jerseys out there that are not nearly as fun to watch.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the one that always gets me is like when the Packers do that like blue yellow Packer one, or the Jets did that for a while. I'm like, this is gross. Yeah, there's a lot of jerseys like that.
I will say with the gray, if you go into SoFi, you'll see a few different shirts at the store that you'll see like a gray Justin Herbert jersey. And you'll see a gray. I think there's one other person. I want to say Derwin James, but they've already kind of started to trickle that in. I don't know if that's going to be like an official thing, but I mean, I went and got an Asante Samuel Jr. jersey, and I was considering doing the color rush one, and they said that they were not doing that one anymore. I was like, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's super interesting. I remember seeing on Twitter like gray Derwin photoshops last year. Those always made the rounds because people thought the new alternate was going to be that. But yeah, that would be kind of interesting if they really went in that direction. Weirdly enough, for me, navy is kind of my least favorite. Before the social media comes from me, like they have for Daniel Popper, who made his return today on Twitter, and you got to play for it again. I think it is still a very good jersey, but I don't know. I was looking at pictures of the old navy on navy they used to have, and they kind of like colored in the bolts, and it looked a little more like bright somehow. But yeah, that's just my take. I think white on white is definitely my favorite one. That's the one that just looks very clean. I'll always remember it kind of now for being Herbert's first game. That's kind of a fun memory. So yeah, I kind of got to go with that one. But
the white on white is great for folks who are in shape. But I think like for the lineman, for the defensive line, or myself, I'm like, I don't think I can pull that off. No way.
Yeah, maybe Linval Joseph doesn't like that one so much. Yeah. So but what do you make kind of about the helmet rule and all the kind of jersey possibilities that are really open to them now starting in 2022?
Well, first off, I love the idea of having the alternate helmet. I actually have one right here that I got signed a while back. And I mean, putting that with some of like the color options would be sick. Like imagine that with some of the other jerseys. I mean, I think it's cool. I don't know why. I know why teams do it because they want to kind of stay consistent with branding and all that stuff. But I think like the NFL has gotten better with kind of letting teams kind of have fun and kind of showcasing some of those things. And I mean, the Chargers have such a good jersey combo. And I think like your point with the Navy, the older one is so kind of historic and it's like it's nostalgic. So I feel like anything that approaches that can be very off-putting to some. So I totally get why that one is not your favorite. They've definitely gone more like in the sleeker route. But
right.
Yeah, I think the new helmet idea is awesome. And I think it's going to look so good with some of these jersey combos. Like imagine the white on white with the dark blue helmet. Like that'd be sick.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, like, I like them going more minimalist in ways. Like, I think powder blue looks a little bit better than it used to, because what they used to do was that they had powder blue with like navy blue before they did the rebrand. So I always thought that looked a little bit clunky, even though it looked good. So yeah, I like the rebrand that they did. The one that the Bengals did looks good too. Just kind of a sleeker look. because the Bengals were kind of, sort of like the old Chargers jerseys a little bit, where they kind of had some of those same problems too. But yeah, so I wanted to kind of get to the main topic of this episode, which is going to be the running back room. And so, what are your expectations, kind of, for the Chargers heading into 2021 in general, and then strictly we'll get into the running backs.
Expectations as a whole for the Chargers. It's an interesting year, and I can't think of a more exciting time for this organization, not just for fans, but for the team and the players and coaching staff. Like there's so much change and there's so much like turnover, but in a good way. And like we have our franchise quarterback, we have a new coaching staff, we've got like franchise players at like key positions. We've got Derwin James, we've got Keenan Allen, Joey Bosa. I mean, Austin Eckler on the pretty reasonable contract. Upcoming Rashawn Slater. There's so many players on this team that are just fun and good people on and off the field. So it's exciting. This team fell short the last few years, and I think you've talked about it 1,000 times, I'm sure, as have we on our show. There's been a lot of mental mistakes. There's been a lot of reasons why this team has not performed like they should have. Injury certainly plays a part, but you don't want to use that as an excuse. I think there's just kind of a rejuvenated approach to this year, and it's hard not to think that the team is going to do well. Now, it's all going to fall on the shoulders of Justin Herbert at the end of the day. I mean, if he can be even close to as good as he was last year, I think this team is going to be great. Offensive line is going to be a really, really, really important component of this. And then, honestly, Derwin James and Drew Tranquill coming back is huge. We know how good Joey Bosa is. Kenneth Murray showed up a bunch. But getting those stars back on the field there's a reason why they are that good. And when you don't have players like that, it impacts your team. And I think we saw that last year, both on the field as well as in the locker room. Like Derwin James just brings that level of leadership. We had Drew Tranquill on our show, and he was just oozing with that leadership and confidence and kind of just like that poise of understanding like what it takes, even on something as minimal as like special teams and taking that personal. So to answer your question much longer than I thought I would say it's an exciting time. Everyone is optimistic, although every team, all 32 fan bases think they're going to Super Bowl right now. But the Chargers are definitely looking up, which is exciting.
Yeah, I think last year was a little bit mentally draining. I know that because we podcasted after every game, and the Broncos game, for example, was sort of our breaking point. But yeah, I think Joey Bosa and Derwin James being back is so huge. Like, you can try to replace them, but you really just can't. Credit to Rayshon Jenkins for stepping up last year. Credit to Jerry Tillery and the other people that they tried on the edge, but it just wasn't the same, right? Like, you just need those players to be instant playmakers. And so I think that was just such a huge part of why last year kind of went down the tube so fast.
And even if you don't have the players, oftentimes you'll see good coaching staff able to kind of overcome that. And you'll have a team that gets decimated by injuries, but they'll still perform well because coaching will get them ready. And I'm not going to badmouth the coaching staff, but they just didn't do their job well enough to be able to overcome the injuries and the mental mistakes and stuff that just happened to this team. So it was a failure on a lot of people's shoulders, and I think a lot of people take the blame. But I think the one thing that is obvious, and I think Haley Elwood from Chargers Weekly came out with an interview with Brian Bulaga, and he kind of came out and he talked about the mentality of this team is very rejuvenated, very refreshed, and they have this like bad taste in their mouth of losing. And they revamped their offensive line. They got folks healthy. I think this team's going to come out with a mission. And if we can stay healthy, I know it's a big if, and I know we all got to knock on wood, but we always talk about it. On paper, right now, this team looks dangerous.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, yeah, on paper, before any of the games were played, this team does look dangerous. And, the coaching staff was good for 2.5 quarters usually last year. And then things usually fell apart. So
unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, and so if I had to put you on the spot right now, playoff team or not playoff team?
Yes, I would say a playoff team. I mean, what? It's an 18-game season or 18-week season, 17 games now, which is going to be so weird for me to remember my
Oh
math
yeah,
as we
that's
go through the season.
on the podcast. We were just going through and being like, "This is a 13-4 team," like, or this is an
Yeah.
11-6. Like, it doesn't make any.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my sweet spot is probably going to be like 11-6 area, and I think it could go up or down, maybe 12-5, 10-7. But I think this is a team where if we could get into the playoffs and they're healthy, it's a dangerous team to go up against. Because anytime you go up against a team that has a great quarterback, great coaching, and a great defense, like that's a recipe for success. And again, if we could stay healthy, this team has that potential. So just get us there. Just get us there. Keep us healthy, please. And we should be having some fun come December.
Yeah, it was weird. Me, Steven, and Tyler were doing the record prediction, just going game by game of the schedule, and then we added up all the points at the end, and I was the only one that had them at 11-6. They both had 5 losses, and I was just surprised because I'm usually or they had 7 losses. I'm usually the negative one, so the pessimist in me was just surprised about that. So I also have them as a playoff team, at least for the time being. So yeah, now I want to do a little bit more in-depth discussion on the running backs room. So that's obviously Austin Eckler, Justin Jackson. You got Joshua Kelly, newly drafted Larry Roundtree, and still Darius Bradwell. Before we get into any of them specifically, how many running backs do you think make the roster, and which ones would you choose?
Honestly, I think I'm going to go with the top 4 that you mentioned, and we had Fernando Ramirez from Sports Illustrated and LAFB on the show recently, and he talked about the importance of the running game for this Chargers team and for Justin Herbert. And you look at kind of the offenses that San Francisco had or Joe Lombardi had, and there's a lot of wrinkles that I think will be deployed from a running game perspective. And I think that all 4 of the running backs that you mentioned, aside from Bradwell, and even him, but I don't think they're going to have 5. They all have a very unique skill set, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but there isn't much overlap between Eckler, Kelly, Jackson, and Roundtree. Like all 4 of them kind of bring a different component. And so I can see why this team would want all 4 of them and be able to kind of utilize them at different places. I'm sure some are definitely going to be playing special teams, but look for that to be kind of running back by committee. Obviously, it's going to be Austin Eckler's show. But I am curious to kind of see what happens with that second spot. I don't necessarily know if there's going to be a surefire number 2 running back.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know either. We've obviously kind of gone through the last couple of years of Justin Jackson injuries, unfortunately, only playing, I think, 16 out of the last 32 the last 2 years, which is tough. It's not his fault, but at the end of the day, kind of the best ability is availability in a lot of ways. And, they did spend a 3rd-round pick on Joshua Kelly last year, now a 6th-round pick on Larry Roundtree. And Justin Jackson after this season is a free agent. So you start to get into, how this running back room could start to shift. And for a little bit last year, I really thought it kind of did. Those first 2 weeks of Joshua Kelly were awesome. Good. Yeah, he looked good. I mean, the Cincinnati game, you can make the argument he won them the game, with his performance. Obviously, the offensive line was playing a little bit better than expected, kind of given the situation that they were in. But, he had something like 12 carries, 60 yards, the touchdown. It was just everything you wanted to see. And then he has the fumble against Kansas City and the fumble against Tampa Bay. And it felt like he lost confidence from there a little bit. And then that sort of got him to where he was later in the season with some of the healthy scratches. So I'm not quite sure what to expect from him this year, because going into training camp last year, and we saw this the first 2 weeks, a lot of people were saying, hey, look, he looks like the best, running back in the room, or he looks like one of the most impressive players of training camp. But it was kind of an erratic season, and you got COVID. What are kind of your specific thoughts on Joshua Kelly and sort of where the expectations should be for him this year?
Yeah, and it's a tough one to pinpoint, because there's so much unknown and there's so much volatility from this past season. I mean, he didn't have really an off season at all. And I feel like for running backs especially, you see a lot of running backs, the top ones that go in the draft, they generally will do pretty well as a rookie. But ones that go in later rounds, like those are really hit and miss. And I think those really require a lot of coaching and a lot of kind of situational awareness. And I just don't think Joshua Kelly had the benefit of the coaching in that and being able to have a whole offseason to kind of be deployed. And then also you tackle on top of that, like the offensive line was atrocious, like historically bad. And as he could be the best running back in the league for that skill set. Like he's not Austin Eckler. He's not going to be able to shift around 6 guys. And if he can't get a hole opened up, like there's only so much he could do. So I think some components of that is because he was a rookie. Some components was because he may have lost a little confidence once he started fumbling and started seeing kind of the offensive line kind of, I don't know, crumble a little bit. But I also think it's just really hard to gauge it from this past year because like there are so many things that happened that were unprecedented that, you know, this year they finally have an offseason. They have a new coaching staff. They have a whole new quarterback. Like everything's like prepared for this now. So I definitely see kind of a bump from Joshua Kelly. And I think it's interesting with Justin Jackson because like this is a contract year. And we said it on a recent episode of Chargers Unleashed. There is not a coach I would rather have during a contract year than Brandon Staley. Because like I think between him and Ronaldo Hill and Lombardi, like all 3 of them are guys that are going to kind of help innovate and get folks the ball. The playmakers should be able to make plays. If Justin Jackson could stay healthy, I don't see how they can oversee him and not give him the ball. I mean, because when healthy, like he's legit. He's a good running back too. And some would argue he could be better than that, but he just has to be able to showcase that. It's going to be interesting. Larry Roundtree, I like he's very frenetic as well. I think he's a violent runner. He runs kind of with no abandon. He doesn't care who's in front of him, who's around him. And so again, they all 4 running backs have a kind of unique skill set. And so I think that's kind of what holds value in the locker room. I think that's why they're all 4 going to make the 53-man roster.
Yeah. We sort of kind of went back on this in the podcast, but like it's sort of really, to me, kind of a 3 running back room right now. And then you have Larry Roundtree, who I think will be on the roster. I think he'll primarily start with special teams, but that'll also be dictated by the health of the room, right? If somebody like Justin Jackson were to get hurt again, then Larry Roundtree kind of has to step up, right? He's kind of the next guy up after Joshua Kelly, right? So that's just kind of depth chart and sort of the coaching mentality there. So, when it comes to Justin Jackson, my thing has been ever since I saw him play, that 2018 season, you have the Steelers game and the Pittsburgh game is awesome from him. His vision to me is, the second best on this team. Like when he's, running between tackles and stuff like that. I think he's honestly the second best running back. And so it's crazy to me that people talk about him as a cut candidate, kind of due to these injuries and stuff like that. And I don't buy that personally. While the injuries, haven't been fun for him or, unfortunately for the fans and all that, it's just like, he's still the most talented running back. And the guys that you would try to replace him with are a rookie, a guy who had some healthy scratches last year, and, Darius Bradwell, who, was kind of a practice squad player and sort of came onto the active roster at times. But yeah, there's just not a lot of experience that I would ultimately trust over somebody like Justin Jackson as the RB2.
Yeah, and he's an athlete, and I think that's one of the things you're going to see with this coaching staff. You've heard him talk about it already. Like Joe Lombardi's talked about, like he just wants to get athletes in the best position to succeed and let players make plays. Justin Jackson's just a playmaker, and I think you want to get those guys the ball. Like I don't necessarily know if Joshua Kelly is known as a playmaker. Like he's a running back and he has a lot of good traits, but I wouldn't necessarily consider him as the playmaker like I would an Austin Eckler or like I would a Justin Jackson. So, yeah, I don't think there's a chance that he gets cut. No. I think there's a better chance that he has a breakout year and gets a crazy contract next year for their team than there is he gets cut. There's no way.
Yeah. And so going to the main guy, we do talk about Austin Eckler. You sort of said that it could be more of a running back by committee approach, obviously, with Austin leading. What are kind of the maybe stat implications or what the expectations should be in terms of maybe a career year for him or maybe a little less than a career year? if they are kind of moving the ball around a lot between a lot of running backs.
I mean, make no mistake about it. Austin Eckler is the running back one, and I think the running back by committee, I think, is going to be 2 through 4. I think it's going to be 1, and then 2, 3, 4 are probably all going to kind of have similar carries or responsibilities or plays. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked at all if Eckler has a career year. I mean, he's coming from an offensive coordinator that had Alvin Kamara, who balled out. Granted, it's also Alvin Kamara, but
right.
Austin Eckler also is arguably one of the best, if not the best, pass-catching running backs in the NFL, bar none, other than maybe Christian McCaffrey. And even that, go look at the statistics. Like, Austin Eckler is right there. So I can see Austin Eckler being deployed more so in the passing game than I think we saw last year. I know he was hurt last year again, so it's hard to kind of look at the statistics and kind of compare them. But I think you're going to see the other 3 running backs being used more for running than you will Austin Eckler. Austin Eckler will probably have more running attempts than all of them, but all 3 of them combined, I think, are going to have more than him because he is so much more dynamic out of the backfield. Get him in space, give him on sweeps, give him he'll fly.
Yeah, I mean, people talk a lot about like kind of who maybe the slot receiver will be in this duo offense and all that, and I'm like, the slot receiver is kind of Austin Eckler, like in a lot of ways, so he's going to line up there and get a lot of targets himself. I might go as far as to say, like, in some instances, you can kind of consider him wide receiver 3, just based on how this offense works. And
it's true. If you were to put a betting line, like, I would say that he will have the 3rd most receptions on the team.
Right. Yeah. I think that's definitely a fair point. And just going into this kind of season, he already has the contract kind of secured and locked down, like we've talked about. Justin Jackson is going into a contract year. I guess from somebody like Larry Roundtree, who's coming into his rookie year, a bit of a different place than any of the other running backs on the team. What do you want to see kind of from him this year?
That's a good question, Alex. I think for me, I would just want to see him kind of soak as much as he can in from his coaching staff. Like, I think this is one of the first times where I think Chargers fans and players are actually like excited to see what a coaching staff can do with a player. Like, in the past, it's felt like this team is made up of a lot of really good players, but are kind of handcuffed by this coaching staff. Whereas now it kind of seems not the opposite, but it seems like these players are very excited for the coaching staff. And so getting a rookie with the coaching staff, I think, is going to be big. I don't necessarily expect these huge, crazy production numbers from him, but I think being able, I think if he can show out on special teams, I think that's going to be a win. Because as much as we want to talk about him as a running back, I think he's much more needed as a special teamer. And I think that's something he hung his hat on in college as well. So if I would look for things from him, special teams contributor, I want to see, hopefully he can kind of get us some of those third and short runs that him and Joshua Kelly will probably split the load there. And then just to kind of continue to develop. He's a rookie. We took him late. There's a reason why we took him late, but there's also a reason why we took him. So it's just, I think I'm more excited just to see what this coaching staff can do with him with an actual offseason behind this offensive line that's rejuvenated. I mean, I don't think we've seen an offensive line this good for this running back room
ever.
A decade, like 20 years. I don't remember the last time I saw an offensive line this good for the Chargers on paper.
Yeah. I mean, you have to probably go back a decade to, some of those like mid 2000s, like Chargers teams like that. That's probably what we're talking about in terms of offensive line. But, even that team didn't necessarily have like, Corey Linsley, somebody that is that kind of guy. All respect to Nick Hardwick, who was very good, but not kind of the quite the talent that somebody like Linsley is. So yeah, going to the offensive line, how do you think that they sort of are going to go about opening up holes for this team? When we talk about some of the new guys that they brought in, I think that's going to be interesting to see. How they're going to open up holes, because last year, we saw maybe a hole would open up, but it just wasn't quite opened up by somebody like Trey Turner, right? Or some of the other pieces on the line. So other than talent, what do you think are some of the kind of scheme differences that, we might notice in the run game?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the hard part is like nobody knows. Like
Right.
it's there's so much uncertainty behind this. I think that's kind of what gets everybody excited. Is like you and I can sit here and talk about what we think about the spread offense and all these like spread run schemes, and going between the 2 and 3 gap. But like, if it was me, like I feel like I would try to stretch the field a little bit more. I would try to go like east west a little bit, give them like a one cut and go. But at the same time, like this is the first time I have seen a Chargers team that has talent to where like we could actually make some damage in the middle of the line. Like go back last year, the year before, like we could not run up the middle to save our life.
Yeah.
Like it was just running into a brick wall. Now some of that was injury, sure, but it's hard to answer that because I don't know what this team will look like because I've never seen the offensive line A, healthy, B, with this much like talent on it, and C, like with his coaching staff. And so I would like to see kind of a spread scheme. I'd like to see him kind of go like zone runs outside a little bit. But hey, for all I know, I mean, Lindsley, Filer, Abushi, like these guys can maul up front, and all of a sudden, like I'm like, yeah, go up the middle. Like go 5 yards up the middle every time, give me 3 yards, cool, I'm good.
Well, and I also think that helps that, hopefully if this running back group is healthy, because, you watch the Miami game last year and it's, 3rd and 4 and they're just giving the rock right up the middle to Kalen Balash. That's kind of been my running joke from last year. It's just, that's kind of a coaching staff decision and all that. But they just didn't have not just the offensive line, like, you got Austin Eckler out, you had Justin Jackson out. And you're down to, Kalen Balash, not Justin Jackson, Joshua Kelly. And they're really like trying to grind it out. But, at times it's really hard to do that, especially when they had that offensive line that they did last year.
It was historically bad. Like
yeah.
I know everybody talks about it, but like you cannot overemphasize it enough. Like they were bad. And like that makes what Justin Herbert did last year so ridiculous. Like, for a rookie to be able to look that good under that much duress constantly, I know there are folks at PFF that say, "Oh, it's not sustainable," but like that's not natural. Like that's not normal. And so we talk about it all the time. But like even if this offensive line can go from worse to like middle of the road, give me
right.
like 16, 18, 20. I don't care. Like that would be leaps and bounds better than what it was these past, 5 years?
Yeah, and I think, even if you're not making a jump to being a top 10 offensive line, even if it's simply, we're top 20, we're top, 15, like that would just be such a wake-up call, and it would help everybody out a lot. And, there's been a lot of talk about the idea of Justin Herbert regression, but one of the things is that, even if he's maybe not quite as good under pressure, he'll have less pressure, hopefully because of this offensive line. So that, maybe takes away a little bit from that whole regression argument, which we got into last podcast. And, some people are tired of hearing about it. So, maybe we'll wait till the season plays out to get into that more. But yeah, so in terms of, how this, offense will work with these running backs, if you had to predict right now, not just, who will make the team, what's your kind of depth chart? Maybe not at the beginning of the season, but what do you think the depth chart would be kind of by the end, assuming everybody's healthy?
That's a big assumption. So assuming
it's a big assumption. Yeah.
Assuming everyone is healthy, I think it goes Eckler, Jackson, Kelly, Roundtree.
Yeah.
In that order.
Yeah.
I don't see how Joshua Kelly can jump over Justin Jackson. But again, like I said before, I don't think the difference between running back 2 and 3 is going to be that much. I think it's just going to be in how they're deployed. So like Justin Jackson's going to kind of be like that zone on the outside. Joshua Kelly's going to be right up the middle. More so, not always, but I would think it'd be those 4 in that order.
Yeah, I would agree with those 4 in that order too. My only exception maybe being if Kelly were to jump Jackson. I don't think that will happen, but like, you did kind of feel like maybe it would happen at the beginning of last year, and then it just didn't.
It felt like they wanted it to happen.
It felt like they wanted it to happen. It felt, he was playing good those first 2 games, and it just, the wheels kind of fell off of it, unfortunately. So Yeah, I don't know kind of where he is, probably third on the depth chart. But the other thing is that they just have such different roles a little bit, right? We do talk about Joshua Kelly is more of a power back. Justin Jackson is kind of, not similar to Eckler, but he is kind of that can receive out of the backfield and also, make some moves in between the tackles. I guess I want to ask you, we talk about that situation with Larry Roundtree. In terms of short yardage backs, this team sometimes it's been partially because of the offensive line, but also because, people will play those unfortunate, fumbles from Eckler a couple preseasons ago in the Detroit game. Do you think that he's a real boost to that sort of short yardage situation?
I think he helps.
Yeah.
I unfortunately, I think the Chargers have had that issue for a while, where I think they've had a lot of that scat back mentality from a running back, but not really the bruiser, or not one that is good enough to really impact a game. Do I think that he could be kind of that short yardage running back? Absolutely. And I think that's kind of why he's brought in. But do you really want to put that much stake in a rookie with, late third round pick or third day pick? I don't know, especially when you have Joshua Kelly, who I think can also do short yardage. I think Roundtree is a more violent runner. I think you can probably get more explosive plays from him, but on third and short, I don't necessarily know if that's what you're wanting. Are you wanting an explosive play on third and short, or are you wanting someone that could just go get 2 yards?
Right. And we've also talked about, the coaching staff and how they sort of maybe want to favor analytics. Analytics, not just, for the Chargers or for some other team, is sort of saying hey, it might be smarter to just pass, on third down, not maybe third and 1, third and inches. But, if you have 3rd and 3, 20 compared to 20 years ago, it makes less sense to run than it does now.
Well,
right?
especially with how terrible our offensive line was last year. It made no sense to run.
Yeah, I think you've gotten that point across. And certainly Chargers fans from last year, remember how bad that offensive line, whether it was 3rd and 1, 4th and 10, whatever it was, it just wasn't quite working out that way. But yeah, so thanks for coming on the pod. It was really fun to have you, Dan. Let the people know where they can find you and Jake and your Twitter and everything that you're doing with LAFB.
Yeah, so you can find the show at LAC_Unleashed on Twitter. We're also on Instagram, on YouTube. You can subscribe there. My co-host, Jake Hefner, you can find him at Jake T. Hefner on Twitter. Myself at Chargers Homer. Yeah, that's kind of where you can find us. We're all over the place, trying to have as much fun as we can. I know it's kind of a dark time in terms of content for Chargers fans, but this is actually a really fun time right now. We're kind of going through position battles on our show. But no, thanks for having me on this one. This is awesome. I love finally being able to talk to a sailor at sea. It's been forever. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah. So go check out their stuff that they're doing over on the Chargers Unleashed podcast. If you haven't, they do really great work over there, and LAFB in general. All the articles that are written over there are great. And I'm not just saying that because Steven writes them. But so, yeah. Yeah, we'll see you guys next time. Steven and Tyler will be back on the pod. So bolt up.